Okay, this is what is called a do-over. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being here this evening. And it is an absolute privilege and a pleasure to be here in this August gathering to talk about a book that is written by Dr. Balu. I've had the pleasure of reading the book, and I've also had the pleasure of having a conversation with Dr. Balu about the book and his thoughts about the Prime Minister's legacy on the day that the new government was being sworn in. Just to borrow from what we heard from Mr. Zainul Bhai earlier today, and he gave us 4 attributes that define, to his mind, Dr. Balu. I'll just add a 5th to that, because very often when you do interviews and you finish with the interview, you very rarely hear back from an interviewer instantly. And what was very interesting to me was that the interview got over, and I got a message from Dr. Balu, I think even before the program had ended, saying thank you very much, I really enjoyed our session. But what I now want to talk to you about is the social stock exchange. So let me add to that, saying that he is a doer. With all his intellectual heft, he is also a doer, so adding to Dr. Zainul Bhai's attributes for Dr. Balu. Since Mr. Piramal brought up the attributes in the form of S, I would say that my interaction with Dr. Balu has put on the table another S, and I would say that that's Sadbhavna, compassion and empathy, which thank you so much for sharing that with all of us. But without further ado, I know we're stretched for time. We have a wonderful guest list here on the panel this evening, and I'm a quick learner, so taking a cue from Mr. Piramal, I will listen, assimilate, and absorb, and let the panel do all the talking. Amitabh Kant needs no introduction. Mr. Piramal, thank you again for being here. Debjani Ghosh and Professor Mahadevan, thank you so much for joining us here. Let me, move away from attributes of leadership and talk to the panel a little bit about the outcomes of leadership in the recent past. And let me start with you, Mr. Kant. Let's talk about leadership in the context of diplomacy. And I want to talk to you in the context of what we did during the G20 presidency, because there was a lot of trepidation, there was a lot of nervousness on whether we will finally get a New Delhi declaration or not. I was there in that room in the morning where it wasn't clear whether a declaration would be signed or not. And you walked in there, and finally there was a smile on your face, and it looked like, okay, the deal is done. But through what happened, not just in the 48 hours to get that declaration done, but through the course of the presidency, explain to me the leadership that India displayed and what you took away from that. Thank you. You'll have to use this one as well.
I can do this. Yeah. I think this is. Yeah.
So, first and foremost, the Prime Minister, when the theme of the presidency was being selected, which was critical, the Prime Minister went into the roots of Indian civilization, which was to take it back to Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and he said that while we may have different geographical boundaries, we may have different political ideologies, but we must in G20 all act as one for the common good of the citizens. And that remained the overwhelming philosophy throughout G20. And actually, we were passing through a very, very complex and a very difficult phase of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and it was across all ministerials that we'd suffered, actually, for lack of consensus. And it was broadly felt by everyone that we'll not be able to arrive at consensus. But despite that, the Prime Minister was very clear that we must be ambitious, we must be very, very inclusive, we must be decisive, and we must be very action-oriented. These were the 4 things he defined it. And the first and foremost was that we made it inclusive by making G20 into a G21 by bringing in African Union as a member of G20. So by one stroke, we included 55 countries of Africa as a member of G20. Secondly, we were able to push the boundaries on all these areas. We were able to bring consensus on almost 212 outcomes and 83 paras. This had never happened before. And, one para, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, it took us 300 hours of negotiation. It took us about close to 16 drafts failed. Only the 17th draft succeeded. We had about 258 bilaterals, meetings for that. But all through, the Prime Minister was getting a situation report every 2 hours. He said, I want consensus. And he talked to me and he said that in case, you should tell these people that if G20 cannot arrive at a consensus, India will not be a part of G20. And with 6 hours to go, we had not arrived at a consensus at that point. And 6 hours to go, the last Sherpa meeting, I just walked into the hall. We knew everybody's red line. We said, this is the last and final draft. You take it. Either you take it or you lump it, and if you don't accept it, India will not be a part of G20. India will work with BRIC. India will work with IPSA, but not be a part of G20. That's my leader seen this draft, and he feels very strongly that this is the best draft. And we had all the emerging markets together. The Brazil said that his Sherpa said that Lula has seen it. The South African Sherpa said his president said it. And I said within 3 hours you either say yes or no. This happened at 12:30 in the night. By 4 o'clock in the morning, I had a yes from all the G7 countries. Now, that could happen only because of the stature and standing of the Prime Minister. He had traveled to ASEAN, he traveled to America, had built up a very good relationship with Putin, with Biden, and all countries eventually said yes, and if it wasn't for India, this consensus would never have been arrived at. So India achieved consensus because of his leadership, India achieved inclusivity because of his leadership, and India made it very, very action-oriented. This was the story of G20, really. And then, we received consensus from all the G7 countries, but USA, we had not yet received it. So in the morning, Prime Minister came to Bharat Mandapam at 8 o'clock to inspect the Bharat Mandapam, and he asked me, ki, kya hua? So I said, sir, abhi usme thoda aur kaam baki hai. So he said, then I started telling him, so he said, nahi, mujhe procedure nahi, outcome batao. So he's very outcome oriented, totally outcome oriented. And so I said, nahi, sir, abhi batata hu aapko thodi. So I phoned up the American Sherpa at about 8:15, and the American Sherpa said, Amitabh, we want two things. One is we want a change of one word, and we want China and Russia to agree first. So then I phoned up the Chinese Sherpa, whose yes we had not got. So the Chinese Sherpa said, yes, because all emerging markets are together, we'll agree, but there's one para which we want to change. So I said, why? You've already agreed to everything. So he said, no, one para is that America will hold G20 in 2026. So he said, my Prime Minister who's come feels that the Americans don't issue visas to China, so you should to withdraw that. So the meeting started, and I sat in the next room with the American Sherpa, the Chinese Sherpa. We negotiated for 3.5 hours. The Chinese wanted a written guarantee, but we used the word ensure, and we finally clinched that at 12:30. And 1 o'clock, the Prime Minister announced that there is a consensus, and we clinched it on the first day. So that was all because of that leadership. He said he was totally outcome oriented on that. So that's how G20 was clinched finally.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've got a backstory here from the man himself, the Sherpa representing India.
So, two things. Many people say that the Prime Minister gets into a lot of micro details, but the Prime Minister also gives you a lot of delegated power. Throughout the G20, he gave me all the authority and all the power, but he wanted me to deliver the outcomes on that. And he was absolutely clear, make it inclusive, make it decisive, but deliver the G20 to me. And that's what we were able to do, but all because of his stature, his standing, his personal relationship that he had built up.
I will talk to you about two other specific instances where there has been leadership and political will in political capital. Mr. Piramal talked about the aspirational districts program. I'll come to that in just a second, but I also do want to talk to you about Swachh Bharat, because you and Paramaiah worked very closely with the Prime Minister on that. I'll come back to you in just a second, but let me get Debjani Ghosh into the conversation. Debjani, another area in the recent past where India has shown leadership which is recognized and acknowledged globally is in technology, and specifically in being able to set up a digital public infrastructure and ensure that it is being seen as a public good, which is something that the G20 also recognized. How do you see this? How do you believe that this has become globally accepted? What do you believe has led to the kind of leadership and resilience that India has shown specifically in this area?
Again, I go back to what Mr. Khan said, which is when you talk about DPI, we talk about the outcome of DPI. Yes, there is a whole process to it. There's the technology stack. But the story, the narrative is being built around the numbers. The narrative is being built around the impact of DPI, the inclusive goal, the population level scale of technology, which no other country has achieved, right? And this is what really stands out. It is an outcome-driven narrative. And, you know, when I talk to a lot of my peers, colleagues outside India, governments outside India, DPI today has become a mindset. It is about thinking outside the box. It is about challenging status quo. Before DPI, the thinking was innovation has to be top-driven. Innovation starts from the top. Innovation's for the rich. It starts from the top, and then you figure out how to scale it. So you keep diluting till it scales, right? And that's been the tech mantra. And all of a sudden, here's India, and I think we did it with DPI, and I also did it with the vaccine strategy, India vaccine story, where we completely challenged that status quo to say, no, we are going to innovate bottoms up. We are going to start from the last woman, you know, the last person out there, and we have to ensure that that person does not get left behind. So now how do you build inclusive technology? So DPI has become more of a mindset of thinking outside the box, challenging status quo, building ecosystem-led versus monopoly-led, an approach. It's about building technology that you trust, because only then will technology scale. So I think the fact that we have been able to talk DPI with numbers, with proven outcome, the fact that a Google, a Paytm, a PhonePe, everybody is participating. It's truly inclusive even from that perspective. It has made a huge difference. And yeah, there are different approaches to the stack, but it is the design principles and it is the mindset of DPI that really stands out. And I think what this has done is it has really established India as a leader with respect to inclusive technology and human-centric technology, which is so important in today's world of AI. This is the biggest challenge in AI, right? And if there's one country that can truly stand up and talk with facts about how to create human-centric technology, without doubt, it is India.
Well, you know, I will talk to you about AI and the leadership role that India can possibly play in an AI world and what leadership will mean in an AI world in just a second. But let me get Mr. Piramal into the conversation as well. Mr. Piramal, you know, the aspiration of making India a developed economy, the aspiration of moving the per capita from 2,500 to 4,000, 5,000, and what that will eventually mean as far as driving consumption and investment is concerned. You know, from a leadership perspective, how do you look at the kind of reforms that have been undertaken, the will shown in taking tough decisions, and what would the expectation now be in terms of the road ahead?
I think clearly that there is a will to do it. It's not only a will. If you look at even the statements which have been made by the Honorable Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, I think they recognize that it is the wealth creators have to be given an opportunity to build this, and I think it is going to happen. There is a lot of reform still needed. It's not that it's not needed. There is reform needed. I think I personally feel that we have to get some of the regulations to be simpler. I do feel that the judicial reform is required. The time that's taken is too much. And I feel that some of the regulators sometimes are really, I think, regulating it. They have to regulate in an economy which is growing and in a growth stage. It is not an economy which has already reached the top. So therefore, I think that mindset has to change as well. And there are, of course, specific reforms that we don't need to. But I think the way people have confidence and the encouragement that has been given to both youth and the young industry, that is possible, that will happen. I mean, no other country has the growth rates and the solid financial and the economic strength that we have today. But there are issues that we need to still look at. I think the bottommost people are still lagging behind. If we don't bring them up, and that's where, you know, the aspirational districts and all the others count. If we don't do that, the gap will just increase significantly between the people who have a GDP of 10,000 and the others who may have just 2,000.
No, absolutely. We need to ensure that we don't see a widening of those inequities and we in fact see a bridging of those. But Professor Mahadevan, let me come to you, because as as Mr. Piramal actually said that this should be made mandatory reading in colleges and across universities. But let me get you to articulate for us what you found was unique and special about your interpretation of the book, as well as the parallels, as well as what is unique about the Indic way of leadership versus the Western style of leadership that we're more accustomed to.
Yeah, so let me first start, since you talk so much about action-oriented thing, let me first start by saying, how would a person who is groomed in the Indic style of leadership will act, will behave? That's the outcome of that, rather than talking about the concepts and so on. Three things will distinctly happen. The book brings it so beautifully. And these three things are generally, in common parlance, understood to be on two sides of the coin. A person who is groomed in Indic style of leadership, with all its scriptural understanding which he has so nicely brought about, gentleness and firmness will coexist in the same person. Strength and gentleness. People think strength means dadagiri. The kind of a mindset people have. If somebody has strength, that means you can bulldoze anything. And somebody is gentle, they think, oh, okay, he's a nice person. Whereas this Indic style of leadership will groom both of them. What would appear like two ends of the spectrum we'll see in the same person. First thing, I find that very nicely brought out in this. Great faith will coexist with broad-mindedness. Today, again, people think faith is narrow-mindedness. I don't know where from this narrative has come, but we seem to have this kind of an opinion. This Indic style of leadership will ensure that the person will have great faith and broad-mindedness. The third thing that will happen is a person who is of this nature, compassion and empathy will be on one side, firmness will be on the other side. Both will coexist. So what seemingly appears to be different shades of a character will all find place in the same person. The book brings it out so beautifully. So this is about the outcome part of it. Now, in a nutshell, what is this Indic leadership? How is it different from the Western notions of leadership, which most of us keep teaching in these universities here? Okay. I think the most important thing, and that's where I really loved the title of the book, is the clinching deal between Indian leadership, Indian style of leadership, and the Western style of leadership. Is the Indian style of leadership very strongly recognizes that there is a world within as much as a world without. The entire Western literature, I have been researching leadership theory for the last 30 years. I have seen 35, 40 theories which have come, and all of them are heading towards the understanding that if you can't talk to yourself, you can't communicate to anyone. If you cannot lead yourself, you cannot lead anyone. If you cannot inspire yourself, you cannot inspire anyone. If you are not happy, you can never make anyone happy. In fact, we don't have to go that far. If we have to understand the basic mechanisms of why leadership will fail, all that we need to do is read chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita. Such a great leader, in the 46th shloka, he says, I am an ashastrapani, dhartarashtraha shastrapaneyaha, rane me hanyuhu kshemataram bhavet. A great warrior says, I don't have any weapons with me, he has already dropped it. And he says, all these Dhritarashtra's sons are all having weapons, let them kill me now. This is called failed leadership. So the question that begs attention in Bhagavad Gita at the very beginning is, why is it a great leader has completely succumbed? Why has he become, I call him a failed leader. Arjuna is a leader, but he failed miserably because he could not understand what is called world within. And that's why Bhagavad Gita is a great treatise on actually leadership. One more I will say, which is very contrasting from the Western style of leadership. Western, which is what we also been teaching, Western style of leadership, whether you explicitly put it or you don't, the basic emphasis is leaders somewhere operate with what is called what is in it for me. Not in a derogatory sense, don't take it that way. There is this underlying current of what is in it for me. That's why, there is also, it says, prayojanam anuddishya mandopina pravartate. Even a dull head does not go without a prayojana. Those kinds of things are there even in our scriptures. But this notion of what it means not to be what is in it for me so beautifully has come in this book. In fact, in Gita, again, there is a beautiful shloka. He says, Name parthasi kartavyam trishulokeshu kinchana, nanavaptam avaptavyam vartayevacha karmani. He says, my wish list is 0. Krishna says, my wish list is 0. But that doesn't mean I'm going to just sit doing nothing. I mean, that gives a certain sense of detaching ourselves. I mean, he has so beautifully brought it in the book, how it grows detachment, how it gives a certain strength and authenticity in decision making. All these are actually part of Indic leadership. If you look at our scriptures, Gita, Ramayana, or Mahabharata, or Upanishad, all these so beautifully comes. But the nice thing about this book is he has distilled it so beautifully, it relieves us from the pain of reading all that, and it has come so nicely here.
High praise for you, Dr. Balu, coming in there from Professor Mahadevan. But Mr. Kant, you wanted to come in on the point that Devjani was making as far as DPI, the digital public infrastructure is concerned, and India's leadership there. And let me also then add my question so that you can answer it in one go. The leadership that was shown as far as the aspirational district program was concerned, the outcome that has led to, as well as on Swachh Bharat, because, to have the audacity and the ambition to make a claim that India would be open defecation free, etc., that required political leadership, political capital. Take me through the experience of having worked on both those missions.
So, firstly, this title, Power Within, I think that a lot of that power within comes from his own courage of conviction and from his ability to do very relentless preparedness. And before all this digital fast payment started, one day he called me up. He'd gone abroad and he landed up in Hyderabad, post demonetization era. He said, "Ye digital payment ko drive karo Niti Aayog se." So and he said, "Ye 100 din mein 100 digital mele karo." So I couldn't understand wo 100 din mein 100 digital mele. So anyway, we worked the whole night and we said ki these are the different ways you can use the mobile to do. You'd recall that period. You can do digital payments. Then next day in the morning, I went to the Principal Secretary, Mr. Nipin Mishra, and I said, "Sir, ये PM के निर्देश हैं, 100 दिन में 100 digital मेले, ये तो हो ही नहीं सकते. तो बहुत मुश्किल काम है सर ये तो और 100 शहरों में 100 दिन में 100 digital मेले करो." तो he said, भाई ये तो बहुत मुश्किल काम है, पर ये तुम ही समझाओ चल के. तो he said, वो एक प्रेजेंटेशन तैयार करो, चलो प्रेजेंटेशन करते हो और कैबिनेट सेक्रेटरी को भी ले चलो. तो we prepared a presentation and then Mr. P.K. Sinha was there, Mr. Nipin Mishra was there, I was there, I made the presentation. So, after the 7th slide, I said, "Sir, आपके वो निर्देश हैं, 100 दिन में 100 digital मेले, 100 शहरों में, बड़ा मुश्किल है सर, ये इसको अच्छी तरह करने दीजिए, थोड़ा होमवर्क करके करते हैं, ब्रांडिंग वगैरह करके अच्छी तरह." He said, "नहीं, वो 100 दिन में ही 100 करो." So I went on, then I went to about the 18th slide or something, then I said, "Sir, सर थोड़ा समय दीजिए, बहुत अच्छी तरह करना चाहते हैं, इसको सक्सेस बनाना है ये वो." He said, "नहीं, मैंने कहा है 100 दिन में ही करो, 100 और 100 ही डिजिटल में ले करो." तो I kept quiet, and then at the end of about the 28th or 29th slide, which was nearing completion, again I said, "Sir, आपके निर्देश हैं, प्रधानमंत्री जी के जो निर्देश होंगे वो तो पूरा करेंगे, पर सर थोड़ा समय दीजिए, अच्छी तरह करना चाहते हैं इसको और इसको सक्सेस बनाना." He said, "नहीं, मैंने कह दिया है, 100 दिन में बार बार ये मत बात करो, 100 दिन में." So that was the end of it all. And I tell you, we got in those 100 days, we got RBI, we got NPCI, we got the private sector, we got all the state governments, everybody together in 100 days and 100 digital melas. And if we hadn't done this, today we do 130 billion fast payments in a year. We do 46% of the real-time fast payments in the world. China does only 26 billion. If we hadn't done those, looking back, looking back, it was his courage of conviction, his determination, his ability, his vision, which saw us push those 100 digital mailers. If we hadn't done it, we would have never got RBI, we'd never have got NPCI, we would have never got all the private banks and the public banks together. We would have never got the private sector of India together to be able to drive the digital payment movement. And that's how it happened. And I think there was relentless preparedness for that, which he made us do. So I'm only speaking from my experience. And similarly for aspirational district, because when he said कि भाई ये जितनी backward district है उनको improve करो, 1 preparation, 2 preparation, 3 preparation, 4 preparation, 4 presentation, 5 presentation. Then he finally after 5th presentation he said कि भाई ये मुझे केवल data चाहिए, मुझे केवल governance चाहिए, मुझे केवल outcome चाहिए. I've never heard a political leader talking about outcomes. I've never heard a political leader, I've been 44 years in government, other than this Prime Minister, I've never heard a political leader talk about outcomes or data or governance. And these are the 3 things on which his philosophy revolves. Data, good governance, and outcome. Deliver on outcomes. And that's what we managed to do. We brought in real-time data on a minute-to-minute basis, and that is how the Baramulla collector walked into my room. He said, sir, I'm coming 5th. I'll make up 5 days to go for that month. He said, I'll make up for it and I'll make sure I come first. I opened the computer in front of him. By the time he left Baramulla and come to Delhi, he'd moved to 8th position. So I said, tum 5th nahi, 8th aa rahe ho. He went back, worked very hard, but he could only come 3rd, but because it was real-time data working on all these outcomes. So I think that if India is to transform, it can only happen on real-time data, which was not possible when I was a young officer. It's possible now in today's world. And the third thing, what he made us do for the Startup India movement. I mean, again, 5-6 rounds of presentations to him. He said, nahi, wo is ministry mein incubation hai, is ministry mein regulatory procedures hai, wahan licensing hai, labor laws hai, ye hai, wo hai, ye theek karo, wo theek karo. 6, one after another, 6 presentations. Relentless work, relentless hard work. And that's how, after that, we launched it. He made only no political leader, no officer will sit with him, only the startups sat with him that day. And those startups, that time we had just 156 startups in India. Today we have 126,000 startups in India. We have over 126 unicorns in India. I mean, our funding has gone up 30x, our incubators have gone up 18x. That's all a consequence of that vision of leadership which has transformed, and that's a consequence of the outcome. And I think the same thing with Swachh Bharat. No leader from the rampart of Red Fort has talked about toilets, about cleanliness, about Swachh Bharat. And involving all these have been mass movements. All these have been community-led. And every time he said this to us, कि प्रोग्राम तब तक मत शुरू करो जब तक कम्युनिटी पार्टिसिपेशन नहीं हो, जब तक प्रिपेयर्डनेस नहीं हो, जब तक सब लोग को साथ नहीं लोगे, नहीं तो ये सब implementation में खराब होगा. And that is why you have to do that homework again and again, keep going back to the table, keep going back to the drawing table again and again. And that vision, that conviction, that courage of conviction, that ability to make you do hard work, and then because he has trust and faith in you, then your ability to build a team to be able to deliver, all that is very critical to my mind. And this is all based on my personal experiences.
Mr. Kant, you've got many awards in your life, but I have to say that you should get the most courageous award for having asked the Prime Minister to reconsider his target 4 times over in one presentation. So that's quite something. But Devjani, let's talk about India in an AI era and the kind of leadership that you believe that we can demonstrate and what you believe will be necessary as we move forward.
See, the biggest problem right now with AI is everyone's building it, but no one knows what problem it's going to solve. And how are you going to monetize it? What's going to be the impact? Everyone is focused on investment. Just last year, within the top big companies in US, they would have spent anything between 80 to 100 billion just building AI, right? The second big problem in AI is, given that it is being built by a handful of companies in a handful of countries, how do you ensure that this is truly going to be inclusive? How do you ensure that it will represent the concerns, the culture, the context of every single country and every single citizen? Or is it going to represent just what the builders want it to represent, right? So, and is it going to significantly increase the divide between the haves and the have-nots? And when you think of all of this, and then you think from an India perspective, and this is what I am just so passionate about when I'm talking about AI at a global context, the lessons that India has frankly given to the world with respect to DPI and building inclusive tech is right now what the world needs to understand, internalize. That here is a proven model on how to build population scale inclusive technology. I keep repeating this because no one else has done it. And it is fascinating what we have been able to do with this, right? The lessons in it, the design principles, when you think about DPI, the design principles, the operating principles are extremely easy to take to the AI narrative and the AI debate, right? Building an open ecosystem, building an interoperable ecosystem, right? Building an ecosystem-led ecosystem. So I think India is tremendously well poised to do two things. One, change the narrative to human-centric, inclusive AI, democratization of AI. And I do believe that we are best placed to do it. Second, be the leader with respect to how do you scale AI? How do you take AI, how do you make AI real? How do you use AI to solve problems, agriculture, climate change, I mean, whatever have you. But what do you do? And therefore, I'm very, very happy that, you know, the Prime Minister and Mighty went ahead and announced this AI mission. Because when you look at the AI mission, no country, by the way, has done anything like this. No country has. And there are a lot of questions about why is India doing this? Why is the government getting involved? I think this is a fantastic step, and the government has to get involved, because that's when you create that equitable access to the technology. If this was a corporate doing it, like you have in other countries, you would not be able to build that inclusive access. So what we have done in AI mission completely stands out. Now, how do we take this to usage models? How do we take this to solve real problems? I would love to see India be the leader with respect to impact, and not just building AI for the sake of building AI.
And I think that's right. Everyone's talking about AI, and we're still yet to figure out the best use cases as well as monetization. I think all of that is a work in progress. But Mr. Piramal, since you have read the book and you gave us a very brief summary of your interpretation of the Prime Minister's leadership attributes, I want to understand from you, what do you take away from the book in terms of lessons, meaningful lessons that you would like to incorporate in the boardroom, that you would like to incorporate within the organization? You talked about alignment at various levels, and I think the art of management is aligning the back end with the front end effectively. What would you take away as the biggest learning and lesson from the book that you would like to incorporate in practice?
One of the lessons that I really learned, and I try to incorporate that, is also about the courage to take bold decisions across the, and you know, it requires, it's easy for us in a boardroom to take a courageous decision very often, but to take it with 1.4 billion people is not easy. I think that's a big lesson that I've learned from this. And I think, again, I have to give Dr. Balu really credit, because he pulled out from so many scriptures. I mean, whether it is Panchatantra on one side, you see the Veda on the other side, you see Gita, you see Mahabharata, you see Ramayana, different parts of it. And I think one has to go into much more depth and really absorb everything, because initial reading alone will not do justice to this book. So I think it has to be...
Have you been inspired now to make a bold decision? What is going to be the bold decision that you're going to make, Mr. Piramal?
First bold decision is to really understand in depth the book, and really, I mean, there are so many basic principles that the book has read. Whatever I said actually is he has only said it. I incorporated what he has said into what my own experience was.
Professor,
Nothing new.
let me put that question to you. You know, what would you like this audience here in this room, as well as those who are watching on TV screens and on digital platforms, to take away from this book in terms of the big lessons that they could inculcate in their lives?
A couple of things I would say. First thing is, being a professor of a business school for 35 years, I should say this. I think there is this widespread thinking that spirituality and business or spirituality and the other daily life doesn't go together. This book will falsify that. I think the greatest takeaway that we must seriously understand is a spiritually invested person will bring that courage to take decisions, will have that compassion to talk about inclusiveness, which Amitabh was talking about. So I think the first important takeaway is it pays heavily to invest in spirituality. In fact, I teach a course on Bhagavad Gita for the last 15 years in IIM Bangalore. It's a huge take for this course. And I keep telling them that at this age, if you invest in spirituality, you have a great future ahead of you. Don't wait for 60 and 65 and say, let me start thinking about spirituality. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this. Because if you see, many of the attributes that Amitabh talked about, they are all flowing from this. That sense of compassion, that axis of love, that is the bedrock of all these decisions. It doesn't happen like that. So I think I would say the single biggest takeaway is it pays eminently to invest in spirituality, and the only available scriptures in the world to have a good sense of spirituality is in India. I think that's the biggest takeaway.
That is the biggest takeaway for you, and perhaps that will be, as Dr. Balu pointed out, it's an interpretational work, so maybe that will be something that many will take away from the book. But I know we're out of time. Dr. Balu, I want to end by you, and I don't mean to steal your thunder for your 10th book, but do give us a sneak peek. You wanted to make a point, Mr. Piramaliam.
Add to what Professor Mahadevan said. Please look at our scriptures. Look at the Gita. Who was it taught to? A young fellow in his 20s, the best archer in the world, in the midst of a battlefield. He was not 60 or 70 or something, he was young, probably under 30 if I'm not mistaken. So that's the lesson that has been taught. So what you said, it's applicable on day-to-day life. You look at Ramayana. Ram has come not as God, as a human being. And he suffers all this, and whatever his life story is not when he's 60 and all. He's probably in his 20s, would you say? So that's it. So it's for all of us at every age to learn. Just add to what you just...
Yes, please. Mr. Kant is also waiting to jump in. Please go ahead.
Another beautiful thing that comes out of this book, since Ajayji talked about Ramayana, if you look at the Balakanda of Ramayana, there is a very strong message. The greatest elements of leadership starts by people knowing the Janapada. That's why Vishwamitra took both the kids, street by street and went all over and so on. That comes so beautifully in this book. That the greatest investment of leadership starts by connecting to the reality, not just sitting on an ivory tower. I mean, the resource may endow me to do all that, but I think the science of leadership lies there, and our scriptures show it so beautifully also. Sorry.
Mr. Kant.
So I think a lot of this is a remarkable book, because the power within, to my mind, comes a lot from the Prime Minister's ability to be a great listener. I mean, when you are making a presentation, he just listens and absorbs. He doesn't speak. That's to my mind, is a great quality. Secondly, I've seen a lot of lousy presentations being made, but I have never seen him get angry. So, I mean, the spirituality comes out of the fact that the bureaucrats, the amount of garbage they dish to him, but I've never seen him get angry. Thirdly, I think Prime Minister, I have never seen him shying away from the fact, and I must be one of those who made a lot of presentations to him. So many times he's turned at me and told me at the end of the presentation, कि तुमने जो बोला मुझे समझ में नहीं आया, फिर से समझाओ. I mean, a leader of that stature, the Prime Minister of the largest democracy, never shy of asking the basic questions and asking कि ये citizen को कैसे impact करेगा. So I think that is the power within this Prime Minister.
All good presentations, Mr. Khan, that you made?
A lot of lousy ones.
Well, Dr. Balu, as I said, I don't mean to steal your thunder. There is a 10th book somewhere, perhaps sooner than we think. But you started your speech by saying that it was a very interesting anecdote when you met the Prime Minister for the very first time. So I'm going to request you to give us a sneak peek into that before we close for the evening.
In the context of writing this book is the first visit. I'll talk about that. You know, leadership truly is driven by what Warren Bennis, the great leadership expert, talks about as a crucible moment. For every one of us, there is a crucible moment. We all experience crucible moments, but we don't reflect on it. So it just passes. It becomes a memory. For a rare few, it stays on as a moment which is relived every day. And what happened to him, I don't think it's in the public domain. Possibly this book is the first time it's coming out publicly, and which is shared in a conversation. He was a young child, maybe 6, 7 years old, in a little village in Gujarat, and I think his underlying principle of communitization comes from those lived experiences. A couple who hadn't had a child for a long time, very longing for a child, and then they have a baby, and the whole community, the whole village celebrates it. And he was fascinated that why is one family's birth of a child in one family celebration for all of us? It doesn't stop there. A week later, the baby passes away. And the whole village goes into mourning. There's a collective grieving for that baby. But more importantly, a cow which was there in that house of that neighbor of Modi's stops eating. And this young child is not sure why. What is it doing? Why is it not eating? So he goes to his father and says, I don't understand. Why is this cow not eating? And his father says, I don't know, but possibly it's also grieving because it's part of the family. So it's grieving for the death in the family. A week later, the cow dies because it's not eaten for a week. And at that was a crucible moment for him. And we all spoke about Seva and the 4S, and most of it comes from that event, the way I've analyzed it. He then tells himself, if an animal can feel so much for human beings, how much should a human being feel for another human being in distress? And his entire understanding of Seva comes, that's why he's able to see outside of himself. So leadership, the way I understood it, and from the scriptures, if I were to just put it in one sentence, it's about understanding oneself. So Adhyay, the Gita talks about. It doesn't stop there. It's also understanding others and the ability to see that there's no separation between you and the others. But in a Vyavaharik world, it's about the actions that bind the self to the others. And for him, the sentence that Swami Vivekananda popularized from the Vedas is Atmano Mokshartam Jagatitayacha. I need my salvation, I need my moksha, and I have to work towards it. But that cannot happen without Jagathita. I think that crucible moment sealed it for him, and that was something which was remarkable. And 50 years of his life is what I have researched. I have a huge material. There will be many more books. I don't know whether I'll have the energy to write them. But one thing I have seen steadily throughout is his expression of Seva has expanded, but his definition has stayed the same. I should be useful to humanity outside of me. And that is the expression of power within.
Well, Dr. Balu, once again, congratulations on the book, and we look forward to many, many more. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Many thanks to the panel for being here this evening. May we all find the power within. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Before we get up, we just request others to kindly give little mementos to our panelists for all their time.
Yeah, exactly. We have.